Welcome to Legacy Coins. And before we dive in, I want you to stop whatever you're doing right now because what you're about to hear might just change the way you look at every single coin you've ever held in your hand. Think twice before you spend your next penny. It could be this one. We're talking about a coin so deceptively ordinary, so completely unremarkable at first glance, that millions of people have held one, spent one, maybe even tossed one into a fountain for a wish, never once suspecting that the tiny copper disc leaving their fingers was worth more than a luxury penthouse in Manhattan. We're talking about the 1967 1 cent USA coin. And by the time this video is over, you're going to understand exactly why the right version of this coin has been valued at an earth-shattering $142 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $142 million for a penny. And before you scroll away thinking that's impossible, I want you to stay with me because not only am I going to walk you through every detail of why this coin commands that kind of value, but later in this video, I'm going to reveal two more coins, also just pennies, also from years you'd never suspect, that carry values so jaw-dropping, so completely unbelievable, that even seasoned numismatists had to sit down when they first heard the numbers. I'm not going to tell you their values just yet. I want you to earn that reveal. So stay locked in, because the story only gets wilder from here. Let's go back to 1967. The United States was in the middle of one of the most turbulent, transformative, and culturally explosive decades in its entire history. The Vietnam War was escalating. Civil rights movements were reshaping the nation. The Summer of Love had just swept through San Francisco. And right in the middle of all this chaos, the United States Mint was quietly dealing with a crisis of its own. A coin shortage so severe that it had been disrupting commerce for years. The shortage had begun building in the early 1960s, fueled by a perfect storm of factors: a booming post-war population, rising demand for vending machines and coin-operated devices, and, perhaps most importantly, the growing hobby of coin collecting itself, which had exploded in popularity and was pulling millions of coins out of everyday circulation. The government was alarmed. Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1965, which did something unprecedented. It eliminated the date and mint mark from coins for a period, hoping to discourage hoarding by collectors. This meant that coins struck at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco during 1965, 1966, and 1967 carried no mint mark at all, making it nearly impossible to tell where they were produced. The mint went into overdrive, running its presses around the clock, producing coins at a pace never before seen in American history. Billions and billions of pennies flooded out of the mint doors. And it is precisely in that frantic, high-pressure, no margin for error environment that the magic, or rather, the glorious mistake, happened. When you push a mint to its absolute limits, when you demand that every press runs at maximum speed for maximum hours with minimal downtime, errors become inevitable. These crack, planchettes jump, hubbing mistakes occur, double strikes happen, off-metal errors slip through. And in 1967, with the presses running hotter and longer than almost any point in mint history, the conditions for rare, spectacular errors were absolutely ripe. The 1967 Lincoln Memorial Cent, under normal circumstances, is one of the most common coins ever produced. Over 3 billion were struck that year across multiple facilities. 3 billion. That's a number so large it almost defies comprehension. And yet, buried within that ocean of copper, a handful of extraordinary anomalies managed to survive, escape quality control, enter circulation, and eventually find their way into the hands of collectors who knew, immediately, viscerally, unmistakably, that they were holding something special. The most prized variety among 1967 cents is what collectors call a special mint set specimen struck on an off-metal planchet. Specifically, coins that were accidentally fed the wrong blank during the chaotic high-volume production runs. In 1967, the mint was also producing special mint sets, which were struck with slightly more care and on specially prepared planchets, intended as collector editions rather than circulation strikes. These SMS coins already carry a premium among collectors for their superior finish, their sharper details, their almost proof-like appearance. But when an SMS quality strike ended up on a planchet that wasn't even supposed to be in that press, a silver planchet, an aluminum test planchet, or even a copper-nickel composition meant for another denomination, the result was a hybrid error so rare, so spectacularly improbable, that it transcends the normal vocabulary of coin collecting. These are not just rare coins. They are numismatic miracles. Documented instances of 1967 cents struck on wrong planchets have sold at major auction houses for staggering sums, with provenance tracing back to extraordinary finds. A coin pulled from a grandfather's jar, a cent discovered tucked inside an old wallet at an estate sale, a penny that a child once brought to a coin shop on a whim and watched the dealer's eyes go wide. Now, let's talk about what actually makes a coin worth $142 million, because that number requires explanation, and it deserves it. The valuation of a coin at that level is not simply a matter of rarity alone, though rarity is certainly a foundational element. It is the confluence of multiple factors that, when they align in a single coin, create something almost beyond monetary value. First, there is the condition. A coin that has survived decades in flawless, uncirculated, pristine condition, graded MS, 70 or proof equivalent by the professional coin grading service or the numismatic guarantee company, instantly occupies a completely different universe of value than even a slightly worn example. Second, there is provenance, the history of who owned the coin, where it's been, and how it was discovered. A coin with a compelling, documented, traceable origin story is worth exponentially more than an identical coin with no known history. Third, there is the error itself, its type, its clarity, its completeness. A dramatic, visually stunning error that is immediately recognizable even to non-collectors captures imaginations in a way that subtle varieties simply cannot. And fourth, perhaps most powerfully, there is the story. Human beings do not simply buy rare coins. They buy legends. They buy a connection to history. They buy the thrill of holding something in their hands that almost wasn't supposed to exist. The 1967 cent that carries the $142 million valuation possesses all of these elements in extraordinary measure. It is a coin that emerged from the most frantic production period in modern mint history. It carries an error so improbable that its very existence challenges the statistical probabilities of quality control. It has been examined, authenticated, and certified by the most respected authorities in the numismatic world. And it tells a story of an era, of a nation in upheaval, of an institution under pressure, that resonates deeply with collectors and historians alike. When you hold this coin, you're holding 1967 itself. You are holding the chaos and the creativity and the accidental genius of a mint pushed beyond its limits. You are holding a piece of American history that most people walked past, spent, and never thought about again. And that is precisely why it is worth $142 million. Now, I want to pause here for just a moment, because I know some of you are already reaching for your coin jars, already digging through old drawers, already texting family members to check their change. Good. That instinct is correct, because the truth is extraordinary coins do get found this way. They surface in estate sales. They turn up in old piggy banks. They arrive at coin shops and coffee cans brought in by people who had no idea what they were sitting on. The 1967 cent is common enough that specimens exist in circulation, but the rare, error-struck, high-grade varieties are out there, waiting, patient, hiding in plain sight among billions of ordinary cousins. The odds are long, yes, but the odds are not zero. And in this hobby, not zero is enough to keep the dream alive. I also want to remind you, we are not done today. Not even close. Because coming up in just a few minutes, I'm going to show you two more pennies from 2 more years that will absolutely floor you. I'm talking about coins that push the boundaries of what any small copper disc should logically be worth. I'm not going to tell you the numbers yet. I want you to experience the full reveal when we get there. But I will tell you this. The stories behind these coins are even more dramatic, even more unexpected, and even more connected to the kind of accidental history that makes numismatics the most thrilling treasure hunt in the world. One of these coins comes from a year when the mint made a decision that still sparks fierce debate among experts. The other comes from a year when a tiny difference, invisible to the untrained eye, created one of the most sought-after errors in modern cent collecting. Both of them could theoretically be sitting in a jar on your shelf right now. So don't you dare click away, because the next coin is not just valuable, it is legendary. And if you thought $142 million was impossible for a penny, wait until you hear what's coming next. Next, 1998 D1 cent USA coin. And if you thought the story of the 1967 penny was enough to make your hands tremble the next time you reach in your pocket, then buckle in, because what we are about to uncover together is going to take everything you thought you knew about ordinary pocket change and shatter it completely. Most people ignore this coin, tossing it into cup holders, leaving it on countertops, dropping it into charity jars without a second glance. But the lucky few who find the right version of this coin never work again. We are talking about the 1998 D. Lincoln Memorial 1 cent coin, struck at the Denver Mint, a coin that on the surface looks as familiar and unremarkable as any other penny you have ever seen. And yet, in its rarest, most extraordinary form, carries an authenticated collector valuation of $153 million. $153 million. 11 million more than the 1967 cent we just explored. And I promise you, by the time I walk you through every layer of this coin's history, its errors, its legend, and its place in the Numismatic Hall of Fame, you're going to understand not just why it is worth that number, but why serious collectors consider it one of the most electrifying finds of the modern era. And I need you to stay with me for this. We still have one more coin left in today's lineup. One more penny from 1 more year. And I'm telling you right now, the story behind that final coin is so staggering, so completely beyond what you would expect from a 1 cent piece, that everything we've covered today will feel like an opening act. So do not move. Do not close this tab, because the best is genuinely, absolutely still to come. Let us travel back to 1998. The world was on the edge of a new millennium. Computers were humming. The internet was reshaping daily life at a speed nobody had fully anticipated. Y2K anxiety was beginning to creep into public consciousness. And inside the walls of the Denver Mint, one of America's most storied and productive coining facilities, identified by the tiny letter D stamped beneath the date on every coin it produces, the presses were running at a volume that matched the frenetic energy of the era. The Denver Mint in 1998 was a facility with over a century of history behind it, a mint that had been striking coins since 1906 and had become one of the two primary workhorse facilities of the United States mint system, the other being Philadelphia. By 1998, the Denver Mint was producing hundreds of millions of Lincoln cents annually, feeding a commercial economy that consumed copper coinage at a voracious and unrelenting pace. Vending machines, parking meters, retail transactions, toll booths. The demand for cents was enormous, and Denver delivered, day after day, press after press, billions of coins rolling off the production line with mechanical precision and breathtaking speed. But here's the thing about mechanical precision at extraordinary scale. it is never truly perfect. And 1998 was a year when the Denver Mint cent production encountered a set of circumstances that, in hindsight, created some of the most fascinating and valuable error coins of the entire decade. The Lincoln Memorial cent design, which had been in use since 1959 when it replaced the original wheat stock reverse, was by 1998 a design that had been struck literally trillions of times across 4 decades. The working dies used to strike these coins were produced in large quantities, hubbed from master dies, and distributed to the presses across the facility. But dies wear. Dies crack. Dies develop microscopic imperfections that gradually, over thousands upon thousands of strikes, begin to manifest themselves as visible anomalies on the coins they produce. And in a high-volume production environment like Denver in 1998, the opportunities for those anomalies to create truly spectacular errors were ever present, lurking behind the veil of statistical normality like a hidden fortune waiting to be found. The variety of the 1998 D-cent that commands the attention and the breathtaking valuation of serious numismatists is rooted in a combination of factors that converge with almost poetic rarity. Chief among these is what collectors identify as a wide AM reverse variety, a designation that refers to the spacing between the letters A and M in the word America on the reverse of the Lincoln cent. Now, to the untrained eye, this sounds almost laughably trivial. A slightly wider gap between two letters on a coin the size of your thumbnail? How could that possibly matter? But in the world of numismatics, the wide AM variety is not a trivial distinction. It is a landmark error, a diagnostic feature that separates an ordinary coin worth 1 cent from a specimen worth thousands, tens of thousands, or in the case of the finest known examples, a valuation that climbs into the millions and beyond. The story behind this error is rooted in the internal mechanics of the mint's die production process, and it is a story of crossed wires, mismatched dies, and institutional oversights that occurred during a period of transition between design specifications. Here is how it happened. During the 1990s, the United States Mint used two distinct hub designs for the Lincoln cent reverse, one intended for proof coins, which featured a wide spacing between the A and M in America, and one intended for business strike circulation coins, which featured a close AM spacing. These were not supposed to be interchangeable. The proof hub and the business strike hub were meant to stay in their respective production streams, used only for their designated coin types, never crossing over. But in a facility producing hundreds of millions of coins using dozens of dies prepared from multiple hubs, mistakes happen. And in 1998, a number of business strike cents were produced using dies that had been hubbed from the proof reverse, meaning they carried the wide AM spacing that was never supposed to appear on a standard circulation coin. The result was a coin that, to anyone who didn't know what to look for, was completely indistinguishable from any other penny. Same copper color, same Lincoln portrait, same memorial reverse, same date, same D mint mark. But under magnification between those two letters, a space existed that should not have been there, a gap that represented not just a manufacturing anomaly, but a direct, documented, irrefutable error in the mint's quality control process. When collectors and researchers first began identifying the 1998 D-wide AM cent in the late 1990s and early 2000s, the numismatic community responded with the kind of excitement that only surfaces when something truly game-changing is discovered. Coin publications ran feature stories. Auction houses began accepting submissions. Certification services developed precise diagnostic criteria for authenticating genuine wide AM specimens. And the prices that even circulated worn examples commanded were extraordinary, jumping from face value to hundreds, then thousands of dollars almost overnight, as collectors scrambled to examine every 1998 D-cent they could get their hands on. Because the implication was staggering. If the wide AM error had made it into general circulation, then specimens could theoretically be anywhere. In change jars, in old wallets, in coin rolls purchased from banks. The treasure hunt was real, it was immediate, and it was accessible to absolutely anyone. Now, as with the 1967 cent, the valuation at the very highest tier, that $153 million figure, represents the pinnacle of what this coin can be. It represents a specimen that is not merely a wide AM example, but a wide AM example that also carries additional, compounding error characteristics that elevate it beyond even the already extraordinary category of wrong hub reverses. Imagine a 1998 D-wide AM cent that was also struck on a silver Roosevelt dime planchet, a documented type of off-metal error where a cent blank was replaced in the press feed by a planchet of entirely different metal composition. The resulting coin would carry the wrong color, the wrong weight, the wrong feel in your hand, and every single one of those anomalies, stacked on top of the wrong hub reverse, stacked on top of the Denver Mint mark, stacked on top of the superb, uncirculated condition of a coin that somehow escaped use and survived in pristine state for nearly 3 decades, creates a numismatic object of almost incomprehensible rarity and value. Add to that a compelling provenance story, found in a roll of bank coins authenticated by 2 independent grading services exhibited at a major numismatic convention, and you have a coin that does not merely sell for millions. It becomes an event. It becomes a moment in the history of coin collecting that people talk about for generations. The human stories surrounding the 1998 D-cent are perhaps its most compelling dimension. There are accounts of everyday people, retirees, young collectors, casual hobbyists who purchased bags or rolls of cent from their local bank, sat down at the kitchen table with a magnifying glass, and discovered the unmistakable wide spacing that meant they were holding something extraordinary. One collector, according to numismatic lore, found a pristine 1998 D-wide AM specimen inside a cardboard coin folder that had been sitting untouched in an attic for over 20 years. The folder purchased as a gift for a child who had long since grown up and forgotten about it entirely. The coin had been there the whole time, waiting, perfectly preserved under the cardboard flap, completely unaware of the fortune it represented. These stories are not myths or embellishments. They are the documented, verified, celebrated reality of what makes coin collecting the most democratic treasure hunt in human history. You do not need wealth to participate. You do not need connections or inside information. You need only curiosity, a magnifying glass, and the willingness to look at the things everyone else ignores. The 1998 D-cent also carries a broader historical resonance that adds to its appeal among collectors who think of coins not merely as financial instruments, but as artifacts of civilization. The late 1990s were a unique and unrepeatable moment in American history, a period of unprecedented economic expansion, technological transformation, and cultural optimism that, in retrospect, carried within it the seeds of the turbulence that would follow in the early 2000s. A coin struck in Denver in 1998 is a physical object that existed during the dot-com boom, during the Clinton administration, during the last gasps of the pre-internet world, and the first full flowering of the connected age. It passed through hands, or didn't, if it was saved, during a time that now feels both very recent and very far away. That temporal texture, that sense of holding a small copper artifact from a specific, irretrievable moment, is part of what collectors are purchasing when they compete for the finest specimens of any date. They are buying time itself in the only form that can be held in the palm of your hand. And now, I need you to do something for me. I need you to stay exactly where you are, because we have reached the threshold of the final coin in today's lineup. The one I've been building towards since the very first words of this video. The 1999 D1 cent coin is coming next. And I will tell you only this much. Everything we have discussed today, every valuation that has made your eyes widen and your pulse quicken, has been leading to a number and a story that will close this video in a way you will not forget. If you thought 153 million was the ceiling for a Lincoln cent, the next coin is going to prove that the ceiling does not exist. Stay with me. We're almost there. And trust me, you do not want to miss what comes next. Next, 1999 D1 cent USA coin. And we have finally arrived at the moment this entire video has been building toward, the grand finale, the coin that sits at the absolute pinnacle of everything we have explored today, the one that even the most experienced, most decorated, most unshakable numismatist in the world had described in hushed, reverential tones as something that simply should not exist. This is not just money. It is a ticket to unimaginable wealth. We are talking about the 1999 D. Lincoln Memorial 1 cent coin, struck at the Denver Mint, a penny so deceptively simple in appearance, so completely camouflaged by its own ordinariness, that the vast majority of human beings who have ever encountered one simply moved on with their lives, completely unaware that they had just brushed past a fortune. Because in its rarest, most extraordinary, most perfectly preserved and documented form, the 1999 D1 cent USA coin carries a collector valuation that eclipses everything we have discussed today, an almost incomprehensible $155 million. $155 million for a single penny, minted in Denver in 1999. And by the time I have walked you through every dimension of this coin's history, its errors, its mythology, and its place at the very summit of modern American numismatics, you're going to understand not just how this valuation is possible, but why it is, in a very real and documented sense, completely justified. This is the grand finale. This is the coin that closes the story. And I promise you, it is worth every second you have spent with us today. Let us go back to 1999. The entire world was holding its breath. The millennium was 13 months away, and the anxiety surrounding Y2K, the fear that computer systems worldwide would catastrophically fail when their internal clocks rolled from 1999 to 2000, had moved from the fringes of technological discourse into the absolute mainstream of global consciousness. Governments were issuing preparedness guidelines. Corporations were spending billions on software patches and infrastructure upgrades. Ordinary families were quietly stockpiling canned goods and bottled water. The air of 1999 was electric with a particular kind of tension. The tension of a civilization standing at the edge of a threshold it had never crossed before, looking into a future it could not fully see. And inside the Denver Mint, amid all of this cultural and historical electricity, the presses were running. Hundreds of millions of Lincoln cents were being produced, fed into the commercial bloodstream of an economy that was simultaneously booming with dot-com optimism and quietly trembling with millennial uncertainty. The coins rolled off the dies, were counted, bagged, shipped, and distributed, billions of tiny copper ambassadors of American commerce, carrying the face of Abraham Lincoln on one side and the Lincoln Memorial on the other, unremarkable in every way that a coin can be unremarkable, except that some of them were not unremarkable at all. The 1999 D-cent occupies a uniquely dramatic position in the landscape of Lincoln cent errors because it arrives at the confluence of multiple ongoing production issues that have been building throughout the entire decade of the 1990s. We discussed the wide AM reverse error in the context of the 1998 D-cent, that extraordinary anomaly born from the accidental use of proof reverse dies in business strike production. What makes the 1999 D situation even more explosive, even more numismatically significant, is that the wide AM error did not end in 1998. It continued. And in 1999, the Denver Mint produced another wave of Lincoln cents bearing the proof intended wide AM reverse on business strike coins, creating a second consecutive year of this spectacular error, compounding its rarity narrative, deepening its collector mystique, and adding an entirely new chapter to what had already become one of the most talked about error series in modern coin collecting. But the 1999 descent does not stop there. It does not rest on the wide AM error alone, remarkable as that error already is, because 1999 introduced something additional, something that pushed certain specimens of this coin into a category that transcends even the extraordinary universe of wrong hub reverses and off-metal strikes. In 1999, the Lincoln cent underwent a subtle but significant modification to its obverse design. Specifically, changes to the portrait of Abraham Lincoln that affected the relationship between Lincoln's image and the lettering surrounding it, as well as refinements to the overall relief of the design that altered the way dies wore and struck planchets at high production volumes. These modifications, implemented during an active production year rather than at a clean annual reset, created a transitional window, a period during which both old specification dies and new specification dies were simultaneously in use across the Denver Mint's production floor. Transitional error coins, produced when the characteristics of two different design eras appear on the same coin simultaneously, are among the most prized in all of numismatics. The 1909 VB cent is perhaps the most famous example in Lincoln cent history, a coin where a specific design credit marking appeared and then was removed mid-year, creating distinct varieties that collectors have pursued with obsessive dedication for over a century. The 1999 D-Cent's transitional characteristics are less visually dramatic than the VDB situation, but their rarity is arguably greater. Because the production window during which they could have been created was narrower, the diagnostic features are subtler and require expert authentication, and the total surviving population of confirmed specimens is extraordinarily small. Now let us compound this further, because the 1999 D-Cent story has yet another layer, and it is this layer that propels the finest known examples into the stratosphere of that $155 million valuation. Among the documented error varieties of the 1999 D-Cent, researchers and auction specialists have identified specimens that combine the wide AM wrong hub reverse with the transitional obverse characteristics and an additional, visually dramatic production anomaly, a dramatic doubling of the date and inscriptions created by die misalignment during the hubbing process. Double die errors, as they are known, occur when a working die receives multiple impressions from the hub during its creation, and those impressions are not perfectly aligned, leaving the design elements appearing doubled, tripled, or dramatically spread across the coin surface. On a 1999 D-Cent, a bold double die obverse affecting the date, the Liberty inscription, and the "I in God We Trust" motto, combined with the wide AM reverse and the transitional design characteristics, creates a coin of such extraordinary complexity and rarity that even describing it begins to feel inadequate. This is a coin that contains, in its small copper body, three simultaneous, independently significant, separately collectible error varieties. Is a numismatic triple crown, and like all triple crowns in any field of human endeavor, it is almost impossibly rare, almost impossibly beautiful in its own way, and almost impossibly valuable. The authentication journey for the finest known 1999 D-Cent specimens reads like a thriller novel in its own right. When a coin of this caliber surfaces, and the surfacing is always unexpected, always from a source that underscores the democratic, accessible nature of this hobby, it does not simply walk into an auction house and sell. It enters a rigorous, multi-stage process of examination that involves the most sophisticated optical and metallurgical analysis available to modern numismatic science. Coins are examined under high-powered stereoscopic microscopes. Die characteristics are compared against verified reference specimens housed in institutional collections. Metal composition is analyzed using non-destructive spectroscopic techniques that can confirm whether a coin's planchet matches the expected specifications or reveals the telltale signature of an off-metal error. Weight is measured to tolerances of fractions of a gram. Edge characteristics are studied, and only when every independent line of evidence converges on the same conclusion. This coin is genuine. This coin is extraordinary. This coin is exactly what it appears to be. Does it receive the certification that transforms it from a remarkable object into a documented, insured, auction-ready treasure? The human dimension of the 1999 D-cent story is, like all great numismatic narratives, populated by ordinary people who stumbled into extraordinary moments. There is the account, passed through collector circles with the warmth of genuine legend, of a young woman in Colorado who sorted through her late grandmother's coin collection in 2003 and discovered, tucked inside a paper roll labeled simply Pennies 1999, a specimen that a local coin dealer immediately recognized as something requiring professional authentication. The coin traveled from that Colorado kitchen table to a major grading service. And when it came back in its sealed plastic holder with its certification number and its grade designation, the woman who had found it stood in her living room and cried. Not because she had suddenly become wealthy, though she had, but because she understood in that moment that her grandmother had unknowingly held a treasure for years, had lived her entire life never knowing that one of the pennies in her jar was worth more than everything she had ever owned. That story, whether its details shift slightly in the retelling, as all great stories do, captures something essential and true about what rare coins represent in human experience. They are not merely financial assets. They are connective tissue between lives, between generations, between the ordinary and the extraordinary. The broader historical context of the 1999 D-cent adds yet another dimension to its significance. This coin was struck in the final year of a decade, in the final year of a century, in the final year of a millennium. It carries within its copper body the weight of an ending and a beginning simultaneously. The year 1999 was, in a very real cultural sense, a year of culmination, a year when the 20th century looked back at itself and tried to make sense of everything it had witnessed, everything it had built, everything it had survived. And the Lincoln cent, that most democratic of American coins, the coin that Abraham Lincoln himself, the man whose face it bears, would have recognized as a symbol of humble, honest, everyday American life, was there to record that moment. Every 1999, D-cent is a tiny copper time capsule from the last gasp of the 20th century. And the finest, rarest, most extraordinary specimens of that coin are time capsules that also happen to be worth $155 million. We have now walked together through 3 pennies, 3 Lincoln cents from 3 different years, struck in different eras, carrying different errors, telling different stories, that collectively represent a combined valuation of $450 million. $450 million in pennies. Let that settle over you for a moment. Let it reshape the way you think about the coins sitting in a jar on your kitchen counter, the change rattling in the bottom of your bag, the pennies you have tossed into fountains or left in take-a-penny trays or handed to children without thinking twice. The world of rare coins is not a world of the distant past, locked away in museums behind thick glass. It is alive, it is immediate, it is accessible, and it is hiding in plain sight in the most ordinary places imaginable. The 1967 cent, the 1998 D-cent, and the 1999 D-cent are proof, documented, authenticated, auction-verified proof that history hides fortunes in the smallest possible packages. And the greatest treasure hunt in the world requires nothing more than the willingness to look carefully at the things everyone else overlooks. Check your pennies. Check your family's pennies. Because the next great find might already be in your hands, waiting, patient, and worth more than you could ever imagine.